Right there, we have the declarations of Guillermo Almada after Pachuca lost in the Intercontinental Cup final against Real Madrid 3-0 on Wednesday. Look, I don't think anybody thought that this would be a particularly close game, but at the end you see 3-0 on the scoreboard. Is there any, as a former Pachuca guy, as somebody who wants to see a Liga MX team do well at that level, any sense of disappointment just in the game itself, not in the overall performance in this tournament?
No, because you've got to put context, behind this. Listen, I understand that people are thinking, well, Pachuca made it to the final. The scoreline indicates it wasn't very competitive. They had moments where they were very competitive, and I don't think they could hang their heads on anything. Listen, there's a very polemic goal, Rodrigo's goal. I do think that Jude Bellingham impedes the vision of Moreno, the goalkeeper. I don't know how that is gone to VAR. It's called a goal. It goes to VAR. The referee gets brought over, sees it, and then says, no, that's not in the direct line of sight. And then there's also a penalty kick call for Pachuca that's not called. They also gets brought down by Valverde. That's not called. I'm not saying they should win this game. I'm saying the scoreline isn't 3-goal difference. This is the goal right here. He comes over to his left, and then look, completely in the line of sight. He's going to duck, but if you look at Moreno literally looks over one way trying to peek at the ball, then goes this way. He's not getting it. I understand it, but it shouldn't have been a goal. I think the scoreline should have been a lot closer, but what I will say is Pachuca's coming off a season where they were the 16th best team in Liga MX. The 16th best team, Seb. There are 18 teams in Liga MX. They weren't good enough to make the play-in. 10 teams make the play-in. They go to this tournament to play Botafogo, Libertadores champions, Brazilian domestic league champions, shouldn't have been in that game, and then you just win. They spanked Botafogo. Ass whooping. I will repeat, an ass whooping, because I know there's a lot of Libertadores fans out there, a lot of Brazilian fans out there. I don't care. You could say it's an alternate squad. They just won the Brazilian league. They were tired. 10 of the 11 starters that played the Libertadores final ended up playing this game. You got whooped. 3-0 versus the 16th best team in Liga MX. Then go on, one more game against an Egyptian powerhouse, their best team and the most successful team in Africa's club history, and you advance to face the winningest team of all time. The team right now that is the gold standard in our sport. I don't care what type of moment they're in. There's a saying, if you're going to lose, muere de algo. Play for something. Make your badge proud. I think Pachuca did.
Yeah. The goal that comes there from Rodrigo in the, 53rd minute, right before that is a De Osa chance.
Yeah.
And if that chance goes and suddenly it's 1-1, and even in the first half hour, I thought okay, Pachuca, you're hanging with them. The reality is the gap is
of course,
it's a monstrous gap.
Laguna.
That said, we've seen Mexican teams in situations like this compete before. We've seen your Tigres do it in a final,
Bayern Munich,
losing 1-0 to Bayern Munich. We've seen Rayados in a semifinal take Liverpool into stoppage time before
Atlante, Barcelona. Sure. We've seen it.
We've seen it. So a little bit disappointed. But then, to your point, big picture on Pachuca, I can't be disappointed. You beat the champions of Africa. You beat the champions of South America. And kind of what you were touching on before is that, Pachuca's 16th in the Liga MX table. We know that can fluctuate from season to season, right? Generally, we know Pachuca's a quality team. They wouldn't be in this tournament if they weren't. But we also know that they're not necessarily one of the blue bloods of Mexican soccer.
Not a big spender.
They're not they don't not spend, but they're not one of the big spenders. They're not one of the big spenders. They're not a Club America. They're not a Rayados. They're not a Tigres. And so,
they're not a Cruz Azul.
At a time when Mexican soccer is devoid of anything positive, to see any of your teams reach this moment, but especially a club that's not known as one of your big boys reach this moment, we got to celebrate this. Because Mexican football hasn't had a lot to celebrate in the last 3 years.
I'm glad you brought that up, because you're in the darkest moment of Mexican football in its history since 1978, since that World Cup. You come off not making it out of the group phase after 7 straight World Cups, making it out of the group phase, to now being the third best national team in the region. And the team that makes your league, your country proud, is a team that literally depends on giving young players a chance. There are a bunch of academy kids. Elias Montiel, The 19-year-old defensive midfielder is voted the third best player in this tournament. He's taking a picture with his bronze ball next to Vinny Jr. and Valverde. He's 19 years old. This should give you hope of what the future can be. But here's the thing. There are very few clubs at all in Mexican football that work the way that Pachuca does. I wish the majority did, but Pachuca's model isn't for everybody. They produce their talent. They bring in good foreign talent to cobijar, to come over and mentor these young domestic players. And you're right. There's a couple of slow seasons, but every third season, every fourth season, they're a powerhouse in Mexico. In the results, in the play, in the style, and how they win games. That was back in this tournament. And listen, they didn't win against Real Madrid, but they gained a lot of support and respect.
And maybe they're an example of how the teams in Mexico that aren't the Club Americas, Tigres, Rayados, etc., can compete without that big-time spending. If you see Pachuca do it, and not just compete domestically, but internationally, and successfully internationally, I would think some of the other mid-table to lower-table clubs could see that and say, okay, here's something that we could strive for. And if you got a few more teams operating like that, I think it would be good, big picture for Mexico.
They don't have the resources Pachuca has. Pachuca has first-world resources when it comes to their facilities, when it comes to their stadium, when it comes to their university. They give kids a chance to actually reside there and study there. If you're not going to be a footballer, you're going to be something else. They're going to give you an opportunity to further your career, whether in the personal or the professional. It is a first-class setup. And I'll tell you one thing they have that the majority, 90% of the teams in Mexico don't have. They got ex-alumni who work within that organization. So they got big players coming back and giving back because they pay them.
You know what I'm curious about? I'm curious if when Shaka Hislop does his power rankings in the coming week, if this result just might get Pachuca into
Fire the algorithm up, Shaka.
If it doesn't get Pachuca into that top 10, we know that it does have them in CONCACAF's end of year.